That's what these students want. We hear it in their chants. Here's Chris.
Okay, I'm Chris Cuomo. Glad to be back with you tonight after a week away. And as it was before, when I had thought long and hard about a message and then it just disappeared, same thing happened today. So we got to worry about what we can control in this life. And let me give you some food for thought with the benefit of a week away. Dealing and being dealt with by reasonable people and their observations about our shared reality. For those saying that these protests on campus have to stop, I say no. No, let them speak. Let's have legitimate protests. Now, there are problems, but let's have the conversation. Young people, concerned people, pained people, angry and outraged people, you're getting the attention. Let's have the conversation. For all the noise, the silence is deafening when it comes to naming what must change. This will never end with a unilateral move from Israel, just like it wouldn't if it were America. You can't talk about ending this and having peace in the Middle East without calling out Hamas. If Hamas is not taken out of control, if Hamas does not unconditionally give back the hostages as a springboard to getting the concessions from Israel, nobody does what Israel has already done. No, it's a genocide. Find me a genocide precipitated by a terrorist group who stole people from the country who would become the aggressor and others and refused to give them back. Find me one. You won't. Why? Because that's not how genocides begin. And the idea of this being a genocide, is there too much killing? Yes. Is there not enough access from Israel for the media? Yes. I should be in Gaza. I should be in the West Bank. Why am I not? Because Israel won't let me. That's why. They say it's too dangerous. I say that's not their decision to make. We've gone to lots of dangerous places. This situation needs eyes because what's happening on TikTok is corrupt. And I don't know who's doing it, and I don't know what their agenda is, but it should be exposed, as should who is funding these protests on the campus of Columbia and elsewhere. Let's have the conversation. Why wasn't that in the Columbia president's letter? Aren't you curious about who's funding all of this activity on your campus? Of course you're not. Because maybe you need that money. Maybe it goes other places. That was such a milquetoasty, double-speak letter from that president that it set a new low standard for leadership. And it's easy to expose. Just change one thing. Substitute the Jews with substitute the Jews with trans folk. Do you think that's the letter that comes out? If the animosity, the hostility, the targeting was toward trans people? Oh, no, it's not a fair comparison. Because why? Because it's different with the Jews, isn't it? Nobody wants to talk about that. I say we talk about it. Why is it different when it comes to the Jews? Is it because they're seen as white? Like Italians? Italian Americans now? You're white. You can't be offended. Just leave the prompter alone. It's not my mono anyway, so I don't know why you're even moving it. I don't know where the mono went. I wrote it. This is where we are. Some people don't want the truth to come out, maybe even where I work. So I'll just ad-lib it because I know this stuff, because I think about it all the time, and you should too. Italian Americans, you can make fun of us all you want. Why? We're white. We've assimilated. We've matriculated. We've made it. Okay? Not the Jews. They are not white. And here's how you know. And I don't care about ethnotyping or genetics. I'm not talking about who comes from the Caucasus and who doesn't. There are people who want to kill them en masse, and that's what a genocide is. An open-ended effort to end a type of people. That is not what Israel is doing. We have seen genocides. It does not look like this. Okay? They are not doing what we did. Oh, but that was wrong too. Well, where were you then? A lot of you weren't born. Social media was the difference. The guiding hand of the Islamic Muslim Brotherhood and other influencers with big pockets and access into social media didn't exist yet. That's happening too. So let's have the conversation. Let's have the conversation. You don't like the settlements in the West Bank? Makes sense. Should be on the table. All these things should. It won't happen until Hamas gives the people back. You are a terror organization. This isn't me saying it. Even with a knife at their neck, people in polls and on the grounds are telling aid workers they don't want Hamas in control. Hamas put them in this, and you know they did. They planned October 7th, didn't tell anybody else. So nobody had a chance to get out. Only they did in the tunnels that they built with the billions that was supposed to go to the infrastructure that doesn't exist. That's what happens when terrorists are given free rein. Let's talk about it. Where are the parents? The university has failed. The president has failed. Please leave. Entreating the encampers to decamp. Please. Really? Look down south. Look south and look at how they're dealing with these things. Even Emory University, Vanderbilt University. It doesn't have to be the way it is in these Ivy League campuses. I say good that the Ivies have been exposed in this series of events. And I'm someone who went to an Ivy League school, and I've always held that out as a source of pride. No more. Because it doesn't matter how excellent the status is if ultimately the institutions stand for nothing that matters. And I have no problem with the protests. And I don't want to see anybody be hurt. I say let's have the conversation. These kids are not getting the reality right. They want to see a genocide. Teach them about the Holocaust. Why are so many in this generation unaware of it? How can that be? Our best generation yet, a third of them aren't sure about the Holocaust. And you wonder why they're so susceptible to propaganda about Hamas on TikTok of all places. Let's have the conversation. The university has failed. You are weak. I'm not sure why, but you are capitulating to the wrong things, literally giving over your head. Where are the parents? These kids paying their own way? Who put them in this position? The kids should offer up their names. Don't hide behind the scarves. You want the light? Take the heat. Own it. Be accountable for your outrage. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, you may get thrown out of school. What matters if it's a genocide, right? If we are Hamas, right? Don't hide. Give up your parents' names. Oh, they shouldn't have to answer for me. The hell they shouldn't. I got one of you. If my kid was running around on campus doing what you guys are doing, I'd be answering for it. I promise you that. That's my kid. Doesn't matter how old you are. You're not paying your way there. You're under somebody else's roof, somebody else's influence. And it's time they step up. And the people who are funding these protests, where are you? Where are the organizations? The invisible hand that is motivating what we're seeing on social media, who is it? Where are they? Where's the investigative reporting on that? This has to be exposed. Let's have the conversation. And to the parents and to the people out there who say, hey, look, these kids are angry. We saw it during BLM. It's going to be summer. This will dissipate. They're going to go home to their internships and all the other stuff they do. Maybe, maybe not. I'll tell you why. I don't see it that way. My last point. 3 words for you. That is a lesson from the past that I don't know that we learned, judging by what I'm seeing right now. Johnny Walker Lind. Look him up. L-I-N-D-H. Young kid, I forget where he grew up, maybe California, something like that. Well-to-do, converted to Islam as a teenager, went overseas, became radicalized, wound up helping terror organizations, put in prison 17 years. Got out a few years early. Everybody got angry about it. How do we know that people aren't being radicalized today and that it ends on campus? How do we know? We never had people shouting, we are the Taliban after 9/11. Right? Do you remember that? Are you old enough to remember? If not, Google it. We didn't have social media, but we didn't have whoever is guiding these things and funding these things being as active, as well equipped, and as effective as they are right now. How do you know it ends with talk? I say protest. I say let's have the conversation, because there are some people who are really not seeing the situation for what it is. This is not a genocide. That doesn't mean it doesn't have to stop. That doesn't mean it's not too bloody. It doesn't mean that Israel doesn't have real issues to address and to back off. That there are aspects of oppression, that there's not enough aid, that there is starvation, that there is too much control, that there is not any media access to this, I believe is a huge failing. So it's not about that they don't have to do things. Why would they before you give back their people, especially when they're dealing with hostages that are held by terrorists? We never would. Your own country never would. France wouldn't. Germany wouldn't. The UK wouldn't. Why would Israel? The only one of all those countries that I just named that actually faces an existential threat. But I'll end where I began. It's different when it's about the Jews. And that's the part that sickens me most. Because I believe that there is animus. I believe there is anti-Semitism. And I believe it's getting worse. They are not white people who have just assimilated into the masses and have the protection of the majority. It is not true. It has never been true. And it will not be true based on what I'm seeing on these campuses. This could get worse as easily as it just goes away. So let's take it on. The student protests and unrest, most recently at Emory, are the latest look. 28 arrests. It's getting a little scary. It's getting a little frisky, but it's nowhere like what we saw with BLM and everything like that. So I believe that the temperature is still somewhere where it could be understood, that there's still room for thought. Okay? Now, I want to get different perspective on what's happening on this campus and how the people who we are entrusting with our kids see what's happening, okay? And one of those arrested for trying to secure the safety of the students, she says, is Emory University's philosophy chair, Noelle McAfee. Now, she was charged with disorderly conduct. I saw the video. I don't know about the charge. I think she was intervening to help a student who was being pinned down by a police officer. But that's not what matters. It matters specifically to her, and she should have her say. But I want her take on why this is happening and what it means going forward. Professor joins us now. Professor, thank you for joining us.
That was something. That was quite a speech. I have to say, I'm a little perplexed. When I think about politics, I think about either the politics of extremism, we can't see shades of gray, or what I hope could be a politics where people could sit down together. So with this encampment in Columbia, I would really recommend that the president go to REI and get a tent and camp out and start talking with the protesters. And she might find out, if you did this, you might find out too, that the protesters are not there in solidarity with Hamas. They're in solidarity with people, the citizens. And I think the distinction needs to be made between the public and legitimate concerns about our collective well-being and governments that don't share that concern. Likewise, governments or administrations of many universities don't really have a concern about how their students learn about politics. They just close down the camps, just like Emory's administration within 3 hours brought in the police and the notorious Georgia Patrol and just shut down brutally this protest. I was coming down just in hopes that this wasn't going to happen. I wasn't part of the organization at all, and I saw the brutality within a few minutes. So I think we need a politics, as you're saying, Chris, where people can learn to talk with each other. And that's where we don't have to engage in this kind of extremism or demonization of other people.
I agree with all of that. It is hard when people are hot, especially young people, to have rational conversation, but that's okay. Time, place, and manner doesn't just exist to limit speech. It exists also to rationalize when to engage. And people can be hot and outraged, and then there can be a cooling off and there can be discussion. I don't have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem with what you were doing either, Professor. However, two things are true at once. Are there a lot of people who are adopting the suffering of what's happening in Gaza as their own cause? Yes. Is that okay? Sure. But there are too many with ugly slogans that are, by definition, anti-Semitic. And there are too many students on American campuses saying things that are flattering to and supportive of a terroristic organization known as Hamas. We both know that. It may be a minority, but it is an unacceptable minority. Well, I'll show you the signs. I'll show you the kids. They're not hiding.
There are anti-Semites among us. They might show up at a protest, but the vast majority, near complete unanimity, these students are concerned about pain and suffering, but also the fact that our university invests in companies that support this. They're calling for disinvestment from companies. Just like when I was in college, we called for disinvestment from apartheid regimes, apartheid supporting country. And this made a difference. But again, the point here is that I don't like the politics that's all about slogans and extremism in either side at all. I think we need to teach our students to sit down and talk. So again, the president of Emory should have gotten attended REI and sat down rather than calling in the state police.
And what happens if the president is there and somebody hits them?
A friend of mine was president of the University of Alabama, and students occupied his office, and he sat down and talked to them. It took many conversations to talk with him. This was decades ago. We seem to have lost this notion that we can talk with people we disagree with because they're going to hit us. So it leads to what you're saying, what happened on the campus where the police were hitting people. We need to find a way beyond this.
I know, but Professor, let's just get out of the academic for a second and get into reality. There's a threat. A lot of these kids are angry, and they're saying angry things, and they're doing angry things, especially to Jewish students. So the idea that they would just give a pass to somebody who they see as the tip of the spear of an oppressive organization should go and hang out with them unprotected is not exactly the most intelligent use of that person's time until they know it would be safe and you can have a conversation. That I'm totally fine with, and I think we certainly need more of it, and you are always welcome here to discuss the state of affairs that's going on, and I appreciate you taking the opportunity to do so, and I'm glad you're okay.
Thank you.
Professor, be well, to be continued. Now, again, it doesn't matter if McAfee and I are coming from the same place. It doesn't matter. You got to talk. You got to hear. That woman is in charge of shaping a lot of the minds that could wind up in the leadership of this country in another generation. Hear her out. See where she is, because she's got more influence than a lot of you do. Now, let's bring in Professor Alan Dershowitz, author of War Against the Jews, and NewsNation correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo, this is the seminal notion.
Hey, Alan.
Chris Cuomo and others are exaggerating. This is overwhelmingly to support the end of suffering in Gaza and not anti-Semitic, not pro-Hamas. Those are the few, and they are being conflated with the overwhelming majority. Do you agree with the assessment?
I don't. I think that anti-Semitism lurks behind anti-Zionism in the shadow and is ready to pounce out at a moment's notice. I have a couple of quick observations, if I may. Hamas does not want a ceasefire. Hamas wants to keep this aggravation going, this suffering going, so they can incite what you're seeing in these college campuses across the country today. This is the best weapon. Hamas, the terrorist Hamas, has managed to, in some way,
they're doing great,
metastasize or metamorphosize into some sympathetic, NGO. Oh, Hamas, the good Hamas, Hamas is a terrorist organization that has perpetrated barbaric crimes. And they knew on October 7th that when they slaughtered and they raped and they mass murdered, that it would so hurt and anger the Israeli people, the Western people of America and the rest of the world, that Israel would strike back in a brutal way because they had to get the people who did that awful thing on October 7th. Hamas knew exactly what it was doing to incite the Israelis and aggravate the Israelis and unleash the Israelis. They knew exactly.
Understood.
The other thing I want to say is that that professor who got arrested today, I believe the tenured professors you're looking for the boogeyman who's funding all these demonstrations. I think tenured professors are the real source of the guidance for these kids. I also think that it's very easy to exaggerate what the kids are doing in these various campuses because we haven't seen it in a while. So you can go to your reporter here in university here, a reporter here in college here, and community college. It's easy. It's a great visual. It's easy to exaggerate the disquiet that the war in Gaza has contributed to. But I absolutely,
it's also interesting.
As the father of I just want to say, as the father of an 18-year-old going off to college, a Jewish girl going off to college, woman going off to college, I am concerned about her safety more than anything else. That's where I start. That's where I finish. She will not, I pledge, will not be victimized. God is my witness. She will have an American college experience like everybody else. And the Jews will not tolerate the kind of singling out that led to the horrors of the past. But having said all that, I think that you talk to your kids, you talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and don't exaggerate what it is that we're seeing right here. And press for peace and the freedom of the hostages. And the more we press for peace and the freedom of the hostages, let Hamas be the deniers. Let Hamas be the perpetrators of this violence. Let Hamas be the ones that allow it to fester and boil over. Chris.
The people in Gaza, Professor Dershowitz, are losing. I would argue Israel is losing. Hamas is winning. This is the best that they have ever had going. I mean, that professor didn't even say the word Hamas in understanding this. It was just both extremes. Hamas is on equal footing with the state of Israel in the American dialogue. What needs to change, and how does that happen?
Has to start from the top. The President of the United States is the one who, in an off-the-cuff interview, equated, much like President Trump did in Charlottesville, equated support for Hamas with support by Israel. He condemned anti-Semitism and condemned those who don't agree with him on the Palestinians. Look, the best proof that this has never been about a ceasefire, it was a fake argument, is that Israel has offered, according to Blinken, the most generous possible ceasefire. They're taking fewer hostages back. They're giving away more prisoners. They're extending the ceasefire. And it's only Hamas who's refusing to accept a ceasefire. Have you heard that from one of these useful idiots? Have you heard that from one of these students, that it's Hamas's fault? This is all about this professor who you had on today. She is the problem. I agree with Geraldo. She and her other tenured professors who aren't teaching critical thinking. They are propagandizing their students into accepting one particular narrative. Chris, you talk about conversation. We haven't had a conversation on a university campus for years. It's only sloganeering. It's only screaming and yelling. It's attacking each other. When's the last time we had a debate? You know that Harvard will not allow me to come and speak and have a debate on the Harvard University campus. I was there as a teacher for 50 years, emeritus for another 10. I offered to come free of charge, pay my own way, to have a debate and a discussion. Not a single faculty, not a single student group would invite me. Chabad invited me, and they had to take me off campus for fear that my life would be endangered if I dared to make the case for the two-state solution. I'm very moderate in Israel. I want a Palestinian state. I want to see the people of Gaza treated well. I don't want to see them used as human shields. But that's not what these students want. They see it in a simplistic, zero-sum way. Good guys, bad guys. We don't care about the facts. We don't care about the news. Sure, there's no ceasefire. It must be the Israel's fault. You know, they used to say in Poland, if something went wrong, it must be the Jews' fault. They're saying that on campuses today. If something's wrong in the Middle East, it's Israel's fault. They cannot understand the nuance, the difficulty, the complexity Thank God we have young people like Geraldo's daughter, Saul. She will go off to college, and she will set people straight, and she is our future. And that's what gives me faith and hope that this can be a transitional event, not something that affects our future.
All right, guys, let me jump. The conversation is to be continued. Appreciate you both. Hard times, but we get through them together or we don't get through them at all. Alan Dershowitz, Geraldo Rivera, thank you both. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to take on another situation that I got to tell you, I was away when this broke. I don't understand. I don't understand how so many people were packing ammo on the way to Turks and Caicos. I don't get it. I have one of the family members with us to explain. These guys don't even know each other. There's 3 of them now being held in Turks and Caicos. Packing ammo? Why? Let's figure it out together. Next. Third perspective. In America, no matter how you get here, when we catch you, you get released. And you come back or you don't come back, depending on if you want to. In Turks and Caicos, they jail you for months or more if you break their rules. Turks and Caicos. 3 men are now being held there for what they claim was unknowingly bringing ammunition like stray bullets into the country. They're facing up to 12 years behind bars for this. Look, I got to tell you, it is weird. This was not a coordinated thing, okay? These guys didn't come together. They weren't going there to shoot. So it is a little weird that this happened, but the penalty. One of those men is 31-year-old Tyler Wynn Rick from Virginia, a husband, father, EMT. Arrested, charged with possession of ammunition after cops found 2 stray bullets, not exactly the makings of a caper, okay, in his backpack as he was about to reboard a cruise he had taken for a bachelor party. He's currently being held in a Turks and Caicos prison. And his wife, Jerry Ann, joins me now. Also joining me is 26-year-old Michael Grimm. Why do we need him? Because he spent 162 days in a prison in Turks and Caicos after pleading guilty to mistakenly bringing ammo in his checked bag, which means he must have made it through TSA without them finding it. He just got out in February. So, Jerry Ann, Michael, thank you both for being with us. Mike, hold on one second. Listen to Jerry Ann with me. Help me understand your husband's situation. Does he know the other 2 guys? Was he going there to use a firearm? Give us this situation, Jerry Ann.
So basically, they were only, my husband and his group of friends were going to celebrate the groom of the bachelor party. He didn't know anyone that has been arrested or anything like that. He hasn't met any of them either. Me and my father-in-law are the only ones that have talked to them. It was very innocent. He goes out shooting to like the range and whatnot. So I'm not sure how they got left behind, and I don't understand why TSA or boarding the ship, these weren't caught.
What are the lawyers telling you about why the authorities there are being so stiff in terms of understanding this situation?
The lawyers haven't been talking about specifically why the officers are being so stiff. Anytime that my husband or my father-in-law has interacted with any of the officers or guards, they've been very nice and very hospitable and very welcoming. They just have treated us so well. I feel like it's more of the government and the actual legislation that is so strict and really just not understanding that this is an honest mistake.
Mm-hmm. Mike, let's bring you in here real quick. You know this. You're nodding along because you're saying, yeah, I lived that. Why did it take so long for you to get out for something that was an honest mistake?
I mean, that's a phenomenal question. The minimum mandatory sentence that I and, frankly, the other Americans are facing is 12 years minimum. And part of that legislation comes from the fact that the Turks and Caicos is, frankly, currently undergoing a crime wave. And so at least what I experienced and what I kind of told and what I saw is it has to do with sending a strong message that they're just simply not going to tolerate this sort of crime anymore from anyone, right? Tourist or not. The context, though, is that Turks and Caicos is the only country in the Caribbean currently, I mean, other than maybe Haiti, that is actually doing this and kind of treating tourists this way. You know, there's no other country in the Caribbean where American tourists frequent where a tourist that inadvertently brings this kind of ammo in is going to face potentially 12 years in prison, right? So I think that's where that comes from.
How'd you handle it?
It was more mental than it was physical. The conditions of the prison were pretty austere. I mean, there was no clean running water. You're kind of exposed to the environment 24/7. The mosquitoes are almost as thick as fog, right? So dengue and like tropical diseases can be a real concern. But I just kept myself focused. I mean, that's what I had to do, right? I just had to make the best use of my time and stay focused and, stay hopeful. So,
Jerry Ann, you're young. You got a beautiful little baby. You need your husband. How worried are you about this and how long it could take?
I am very worried because I wonder when are they gonna decide to keep making the law stricter? Are they gonna make more of a statement by actually continuing with prison sentences after the hearing? I really want him home. We're not obviously the same without him, but I do hope that with it getting the word out there, that more light comes to it and we can actually help them down there understand that this is just outrageous for such a small crime for someone who was inadvertently doing something illegal that they didn't even know that was illegal.
Right. Ammunition, but with no weapon. Mike Grimm, thank you very much. I'm glad that you're on the other side of it now. Appreciate your perspective. I'll probably call on you again when we learn the next chapter of this to get your take on it. And Jerry Ann, anything we can do, we're a call away. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Keep your attitude up. You got a great attitude, Jerry Ann. I wouldn't be handling it as well, especially with the young baby. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. A professor and an historian who has correctly predicted the results of the last 9 of 10 presidential elections says, ignore the polls and pundits. Good. So whom does he think wins the race? And how does he handicap the race with Bobby Kennedy in it? Next. Out of the last 10 elections, he says, forget the polls, forget the pundits. Why? Let's ask him. Distinguished history professor at American University, Alan Lichtman. Professor, big fan, as you know. Thank you for joining me.
Good to see you, my friend.
So why do we ignore the polls, and what do you know?
Yeah. Early polls, and even late polls, are entirely misleading. Do with them what the great philosopher David Hume said you should do to works of superstition. Consign them to the flames. They lead you down the primrose path of error, as we saw not just in 2016, but also, for example, in 1988, when George H.W. Bush was 18 points behind his opponent Mike Dukakis as late as June of 1988. And all the pundits had written him off, but I said, he is a shoo-in to win because I have my own system, the keys to the White House, which, unlike the polls, which are just snapshots with no predictive value, the keys probe the structure of how American presidential elections really work. And the message, Chris, and I think it's a positive one, is that governance, not campaigning, counts. And the keys gauge the strength and performance of the White House party to determine, based on history, and my system goes all the way back retrospectively to 1860, whether or not the party holding the White House is going to get 4 more years.
So do we have a graphic of the 13 keys that Lichtman has? Because they are very all-encompassing in terms of a macro look at what happened on their watch. The Are You Better Off Than 4 Years Away, 4 years ago. Tell me this. how do you factor Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Do you believe he stays in? Do you believe he decides the election?
It's possible. We have a third party key, which if you have a significant third party key, and that means you're going to get at least 5% of the presidential vote. Of course, I don't know that ahead of time. So while I don't take the polls literally, I have a basic rule of thumb. You got to consistently poll as you get close to the election at 10% or more. RFK Jr. has been all over the map, as you know, with these early polls, anywhere from 3 to 15%. But he could be a spoiler. In 1992, when Bill Clinton upset H.W. Bush, Ross Perot was the fatal sixth key against the incumbent party. 6 keys of my 13, if they go against the White House party, they're predicted losers.
So who do you think he hurts more, and when are you ready to predict?
Unless it's a clear split in the opposition party, a third party counts against. Unless it's a clear split in the opposition party, a third party counts against the White House party. Not just in terms of parsing the vote, which is very hard to do with, candidates getting around 10%, but also because it's a sign of discontent with the ruling party. Now, you've heard all the pundits saying, Biden should step down. We should get a younger guy. That, again, is the path to error. Biden running, you win 2 of my keys, incumbency and party contest. That means 6 more keys would have to fall. Biden doesn't run, you lose both of those keys, and only 4 more keys would have to fall. Right now, I haven't made a final prediction, Chris. I'm happy to come on when I do, probably in August.
Please.
But as I've said, a lot would have to go wrong for Biden to lose. And here's what your audience should look at. My foreign policy success and failure keys. Look at Gaza and Ukraine. The third party key, and one that I didn't expect but now has arisen, is social unrest. All 4 of those keys would have to turn for Biden to lose.
So, and they may, come back in August. Let's do it in person. I'll bring you in, and so we can go through all the keys and spend a bunch of time doing it so everyone can see in real time how much smarter you are than I am.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I'm happy to come on.
I know that. I don't need any keys to tell it. I've been studying you for a long time, Lichtman, and I'm better for it. Professor, thank you. I'll see you in August. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. When we come back, I got Governor Sununu. What's worse, supporting somebody who is convicted of felonies or who shoots their own dog? That is an emerging proposition to wrestle with on the right. How does the governor come down on it? Let's bring in New Hampshire's Republican governor, Governor Chris Sununu. It's good to see you, Gov. Can we agree that Governor Noem is out of contention as someone who shot her own dog?
Yeah, that doesn't help. That doesn't help. Look, the story is strange enough. The fact that she did it is weird, but I want to know who read that and said, hey, Christy, that's a good story. You should leave that in the book. Like, that's just, I don't understand that at all. So I kind of famously tell everybody, whether you like animals or not, you always hold the puppy in your campaign ads. You don't shoot them. So it's the whole thing is just really, really weird. And but, what are you going to do?
It gives me a little bit, just a little bit of hope for the humanity of our politics that Republicans, too, have been saying Noem is as dead as the dog that she shot in terms of her political future with the Trump ticket. Now, let's look at the other one. Did you ever think of that you would be saying on national television repeatedly, yeah, I support a guy even if he's a convicted felon. Yeah, I support him. I still support him. Did you ever think you'd have to say that?
No, look, I don't think anybody, like we've all said, nobody wanted either of these candidates on top of the Democrat or the Republican side of the ticket. But elections are about choices. And yeah, I'm gonna vote for the Republican side of the ticket to be sure. The reality is that people are getting crushed financially. They can't afford anything. They can't put groceries in their homes. They can't pay their rent. They have record credit card debt. And while we hate the drama of what's happening in the courthouse, think about it this way, Chris. Nobody's being kept awake by the drama of Trump in the courthouse. They don't like it. It's all chaos. None of us like it. I worked really hard to make sure Trump wasn't the nominee. But you know what's keeping them awake at night? Paying their bills, making sure their kids can go to school, making sure that they have opportunities down the road. That financial stress is crushing families. And that's why right now it's 49-43. I mean, that's a reality. And elections are about choices. You don't go in and explain your vote this way or that way. You choose A, you choose B. You got to make a choice.
Right, but you got to rationalize the choice to yourself as well. You're saying policy. On the policy front, you have zero concern that Donald Trump would do something to disrupt the election or disrupt any of the institutions that matter as a form of governance if he were to become president again. You have zero concern about that.
No, look, I don't think anyone has zero concern that either side would absolutely accept the results of the election. Obviously, the election denial stuff is terrible. The January 6th stuff was terrible. But those are not disqualifiers. If you think that's a disqualifying issue, I respect that. I don't agree with it, but I respect it. I'm not going to judge you for it. But don't judge us on the other side that say, hey, policies matter. This is not the America that we want. The families are getting crushed. The hatred and anti-Semitism we're seeing on campuses that goes completely unchecked. The open border, where even more Latino voters now look like they're supporting the Republican candidate for the first time. Because this is not the America they wanted to be in. This is not the financial crush that they expected. So there's a lot of reasons why people may vote one way or the other. It's not 100% to zero on either side. No one wanted these two candidates, practically speaking. But you got to make a choice at the end of the day. The pros have to outweigh the cons. So your metrics might be a little different than mine, but don't judge the American people because they're getting crushed financially and want to see a culture change and a financial change out of Washington.
Oh, I get it. They just deserve better choices. That's why I was pushing you to run.
Yeah, that's
Governor,
right.
To be continued. I appreciate you. We'll continue the conversation. Thank you for being on tonight. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, brother. Be good, my friend.
4 minutes, 45 seconds. Thank you, sir. I got a final thought you're going to want to hear. You love them. Don't wait. We wait too long in life to tell people what they mean. I was reminded of that this weekend. My respect for empathy, my constant drive to be better at practice.